It's the Crew Reviews Christmas Extravaganza with your hosts, Michael Houtz, Christopher Albanese, Sean Cameron, and Eric P. Bishop, starring L.A. Chandlar, award-winning author of the Art Deco Mystery Series. Holiday music by Unfivegettable, with special guests Harry Connick Jr., comedian Louis Anderson, Jamie Farr, from WKRP in Cincinnati, Howard Hessman, the musical stylings of Mickey Dolenz, Christmas poetry from Mel Gibson and Danny Glover, White House holiday greeting from Vice President Mike Pence, plus a new sighting of the Loch Ness Monster, and featuring Eva Gabor, McLean Stevenson, a special reading of "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" by Noam Chomsky, with additional music by the Mandrell Sisters.
The number you have dialed has been changed. The new number is... Please note, the new number is...
Merry Christmas and welcome to the Crew Reviews. Mike, Sean, Chris, and I are excited to have you with us today, but more importantly, we're honored to have our friend and national best-selling author, L.A. Chandlar, as our guest for this most festive of episodes. L.A., or as we know her, Laurie, is the author of 3 Art Deco Mystery Series novels set in New York City in the 1930s. Her novels include The Silver Gun, the Agatha Nominated novel The Gold Pawn, and Suspense Magazine's best book of the year 2019, The Pearl Dagger. The series follows the exploits of Lane Sanders as she navigates big city politics, murder, mystery, and even love. An accomplished author, a vintage cocktail connoisseur, a public speaker, and one heck of a New York City tour guide, we are excited to welcome Laurie to our show. Laurie, thank you so much for joining us on the Crew Review today.
Hey, how are you?
We're honored to have you. Throw a toast to you.
Thanks.
You got a toast to yourself.
Cheers.
Mm.
Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
And Merry Christmas.
We are going to jump right into the questions, Laurie. So, since it's extremely important to your series, I want to start out talking about genre. And how much of a challenge has it been for you to incorporate historical figures into a fictional premise?
It's a great question. I love that part of it, actually. There's so many interesting historical figures during this time period, and I love taking historical figures maybe that you don't always know about in a different kind of light. So the main one that you know about is our main character is Mayor Fiorello La Guardia, and he's just so enjoyable to write about because he's so funny, and he fought for the little guy, and he's everything that you kind of miss in politics now. And I feel like sharing about how he would really meet with everyday people continually every day and find out about their problems and see how they could help. And he was known as America's mayor for that reason. So it was really fun to work with him. But then I always feel like we learn history in pockets. And so you only learn about history one thing at a time, where so much was going on at the same time. And that's the best part of historical fiction, is helping someone really sit in the pocket of an era, and especially with those kinds of figures. So I have lots of cameos with that to bring in those nuances or that flair. So it's hard in that you are constantly researching all the time, and you really you don't want to miss out on anything, and especially if there's something interesting going on, but it's really fun too. And especially it's a really dynamic time period. And so you can really bring in things that maybe people don't really know that much about. And that's always really fun.
Do you feel a pressure to, like, as you mentioned, even with the newest book, you bring in Churchill. So do you feel a pressure to tell about them, but make sure you don't reveal something that's not true? So having to really make sure what you're about to say is going to be spot on.
Yeah, yes, because there are history people that will nail you if you get something wrong. But mostly you can handle stuff in most historical fiction. I think someone just said, I can't remember which, it was a panel I was running with Sandra Brown on it, but someone said, there's a famous author like Lee Child or something like that that said basically historical fiction is fine to write, just don't ever touch the Civil War or guns and get facts wrong. Because they're gonna nail you. I'm like, it's really true. So yeah, I mean, you have to be careful, and there's a lot of historical facts that are a little wishy-washy, and sometimes you'll get people that are like, I don't think this is true, you know. So yeah, you do have to be careful with that. Yeah.
So when you're infusing these real life characters and the details from that era, where do you go for your source material? Do you have like a favorite fountain of information that you gather from, or is it kind of here and kind of there?
All over the place, but I do have one favorite book that I found that was just gold. It's this book by Hulbert Footner called New York City of Cities, and it's this big fat, it's like a tour guide book, but it's like 2 inches tall, and it's what I love about it is he takes this tour around New York, but he doesn't hit just tourist sites. He actually goes to like the police precincts, and he sees night court, and Fiorello La Guardia is actually running night court, and it was written and printed in 1937. So for me, it was gold because it was such a eyewitness account of the time, not with the hindsight of the future. So that stuff is amazing. And there's even things in there, like I said, of how the it's in, I think, book 2, The Gold Pawn, how, because one of my main characters is a detective and then NYPD, and they had on every Friday, they basically had open night time with open mic time with all of the people who are arrested, and they literally had a microphone, and the detectives would stand around, and the criminals who were arrested would have a chance to kind of plead their case, and the wittier ones would know that if they had kind of a hot crowd, they could probably get a lighter sentence if they were smart and funny.
Nice.
And then they would decide, the detectives would decide based on the open mic time what to do with these guys. So stuff like that's in the book, and so that's why it's such gold. It's, you know, that's that stuff's hard to find, those eyewitness accounts of in the pocket, not tainted by, you know, World War II wasn't starting yet for us, and we were years off, and how to have that perspective. So those are my favorite eyewitness accounts from the time. So what's magazines are awesome too. Magazines are hilarious because I get a lot with their advertisements. So like the Life magazine's first issue was in November of 36 when my books take place. And I love that because the cover of that magazine was by a female photojournalist. So I was loving how women had such a higher notoriety in the workforce than I really thought that they had prior to World War II. But the best part of that magazine is the advertisements, because they have all great gadgets and stuff, and then all the things that like we don't have now. There's a Thanksgiving one that has all these pictures of Thanksgiving, and it says, "For digestion's sake, smoke camels." You know.
There's something to that.
Yeah, you know, all these nuances about the time and what was okay and clothing, and you know, I love that stuff.
I always like looking at the old advertisements and seeing how much things cost. You know,
yes,
like a phone or a typewriter or whatnot.
Yeah.
But so Laurie, your Art Deco series, it takes place in the 1930s, as you were just saying, New York City with Mayor La Guardia. So what drew you specifically to that time period?
You know, actually, it was a funny thing. I've always read historical fiction. I really love that. That's one of my favorite kinds of genres to read. So it was always kind of in my background of my tastes. And we actually moved to New York City we were trying to move here on 9/11, and we couldn't do that. And we ended up moving here about 2 weeks later. And what happened was we got to see New York City in a totally different frame of mind than we've ever seen. And I happened to pick up at the same time that the city was also rocked by 9/11. I happened to pick up a biography about Fiorello La Guardia. So he was the 3-term mayor during the 30s, so that interwar period and during the Depression. And I realized I'd really pigeonholed the 30s into being only about the Depression, only about like the grapes of wrath, the shanty towns, the soup lines. And as I was personally seeing New York in this broken time, but really amazing time. Art was going crazy. Attendance at like all the houses of faith was going up, as well as museums and all that. It was fascinating. People were just doing art to heal themselves personally, but also in big statement pieces. The humor was off the charts. Even Jerry Seinfeld did one of his best acts of his life in January after 9/11, and it wasn't about 9/11, but it was such a good act, and it was exactly what the city needed. We needed that humor.
Yeah.
And so I started reading about LaGuardia, and LaGuardia had all those aspects. Art was going bananas in the 30s. Women in the workplace, much more prominent positions than I ever realized, way before the Rosie the Riveters. LaGuardia himself is hysterical. I mean, I have a lot of the real stunts he pulled in my books, but they're so funny that I even have people that are like, that couldn't have happened. And I'm like, you didn't read my author notes, because that totally happened. And I love that humor and that vitality. And that is what drew me to, I thought LaGuardia would be such a good main character, but I was like, we need more of that. That whole beauty out of ashes theme is so poignant. And to see this time that was really broken and difficult, but yet all of these are all the iconic Art Deco buildings that we know and love. The Empire State Building, Rockefeller Center, Chrysler Building, all of those were built after the stock market crash and in the 20s after the crash and despite the depression. And I love that kind of story. And I think we don't hear enough about that. Real life people that really make a difference. And so I really wanted to tell that side of the story.
So there's another kind of exploration that goes on in your books. You obviously explore the history of the city and the people, but Lane explores the history and the mysteries of her own family. And later Finn kind of goes down that same road. So was there something personal that made you want to take those characters down those sort of sometimes dark paths of their own past?
I wanted the characters to exemplify the times too. And Lane especially is a very positive person. Despite she has tragedy in her life, but she also has great support in her life, so she's got that tension like the time, as we all do, and I think Finn as well. There's difficulty, but there's also really good stuff. And I felt like it looked like what the time period was, and I wanted them to have that story arc of how they were developing. And actually Fiorello La Guardia does too. I really wanted the whole entire series is supposed to be kind of reflective of his personality, and he had a lot of tragedy in his life. He overcame a lot and did amazing things, from being a fighter pilot in World War I to being in Congress to being the mayor. But he had some really tough tragedies that I will probably talk more about in future books. And yet he was still building the city and had such humor and joie de vivre. And I really wanted Lane and Finn especially to have that as well.
Okay, so building on the themes discussion, the themes run through your books. And so when you started the Silver Gun, did you have a roadmap of where you were going to go with the Gold Pawn and where the Pearl Dagger was going to head? And is there a fourth book coming?
I did have a roadmap, but actually I wrote the first manuscript before I had an agent, and then I was shopping for an agent. And one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was keep writing, even while you're looking for an agent. And I had so many authors I followed that were successful, big authors. Like even Louise Penny said that she took I think she said, this was at a conference, so I can't be quoted on it, but I swear she was like, I took 10 or 12 years to write the first book. And then
Louise Penny said that?
Dozens of books, Louise Penny. And then, then they're like bam, 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 every year. So that was even her advice. She's like, keep writing. So I knew, you always learn as a writer, you will always become better the more you write, right? And that's the goal. So I figured I would keep writing because I had an idea of where I wanted the story to go. I don't really tend to outline books a whole lot. I have a whole system we can talk about, but I knew where I wanted it to go. But I also knew that book 2 would inform book 1. And so sure enough, there's things that you develop that you're like, oh, that's a great approach to this. Or maybe there's just a different character flaw that you're like, ooh, I need to add that in. And that really defines this character. So let me add it into book 1 and develop it. So by the time I got a contract for 3 books, I had 2.5 written.
Okay.
And of course, a lot of editing would happen, but they're 2.5 written, which is great.
that's awesome.
Because then I could focus more on marketing and stuff when the other books start coming out. I do have a plan for books 4 and 5 for sure, but probably 4, 5, and 6. I don't know when they'll come out. I'm not really sure about the timing of that, but I really like where they're going. The book 4 takes place a lot in the Chrysler Building, and there was a famous club that was on like the upper floors in the Chrysler Building called the Cloud Club, and that's kind of where the businessmen of New York kind of held court. And of course, you know, Lane has to find her way in there, of course. And there's a murder, of course. And then there's another thing that Fiorello actually worked on in real life. A lot of times I use pieces of real history to inspire the actual mystery that's going to happen. So I have to be careful because I don't really talk about real stories. Like I use real incidents in my books that happen with real characters in real life, but you know, this is a fictitious story, but I will use events to spur on something. So for instance, in real life, Fiorello would shake down institutions in the city if he heard that they weren't, you know, handling the citizens well. So one day he actually drove up to Harlem prison, heard the guards were not taking care of the inmates there very well, does a surprise visit, and of course finds out that there's all this stuff happening where like the inmates are running the kitchen, the inmates are running everything while the guards are sleeping. So holy hell breaks out like he always does. And then in real life, he found 2 kids that were being kept in the prison cells that had been witnesses to a murder, and they had some ridiculous bail. It was like $10,000 or $15,000 in the 30s. And if he went on bail anyway, they were witnesses to a murder. So he yanked him out himself and took them to the Children's Society. So what I do for my mystery is they never talk about what murder they witnessed. So I write what murder they witnessed. And it's outside, it's like cool, involving the Cloud Club. So that's that cool one. Book 5 is going to be about Coney Island. And it used to be called Nickel Empire. And I like that for a title. And Coney Island, when it opened up, it was the subway system allowed for the first time New Yorkers to get to the beaches for a nickel. And it just was life-changing. And Coney Island is still a really interesting place.
It has changed since the 30s.
Oh, yeah.
It's been on the 40s.
A few years ago, I remember going there and I'm like, oh my God, everything we learned about Bugs Bunny and sideshows, it's totally true. They have all these freak shows and stuff. And I remember my boys were little and I took them to Coney Island and they had these freak shows that were in these trailers, and they're talking about, it was really seedy, and they're talking about like 2-headed cows, and I'm like, oh my God. And of course my boys are like, let's go there.
Well, that's why our show's so successful.
It's hilarious. But I'm going to write about in real life, LaGuardia had a real big problem with fortune tellers. His first wife, and this is part of the tragic part of his background, was his first wife was always kind of a frail person, and they had a daughter. And then about a year old, the daughter died from meningitis. And then like maybe just a little bit later, the wife died. And right before then, or sometime before then, the wife had gone to see a fortune teller in real life. And she told her that she and the daughter would die young. Ooh. And so he was livid because he didn't know, he knew it was a con, but it was also like taking advantage of someone who was already weak, and it just was so wrong. So for decades, it was illegal for fortune tellers, palm readers, all that kind of psychic stuff to be on like the sidewalk level of New York. You could be on the second level or basement level. And to this day, there's some on sidewalk level, but most of them are on a story up or down. And so it's going to be about a con artist, fortune teller that's at Coney Island. And then if I do book 6, I'm going to take it back to Detroit. And Detroit used to be known as Whiskey Town in Prohibition. So I'd like to call it Whiskey Town and have it be.
A little bit about Whiskey Town right here.
Yep.
So it was funny you were talking about Coney Island. My father used to tell me, because he grew up in Brooklyn, and when he was sick and he had whooping cough, the prescription was take your child out to the beach down to Coney Island and let him breathe in the salt air. And that was that was it.
It's the humidity.
So you gave some pretty good stories about Mayor La Guardia. I mean, that guy's interesting as all hell. I mean, they named an airport after him in New York City, which is kind of cool. And you and I have talked about him a little bit before, and you mentioned something to me, and I don't know if it's completely true that maybe he was maybe a spy. And I was wondering if you could maybe expand on that a little bit.
Well, I think that, I don't know, I had read somewhere that the KGB, I don't know if he was an actual spy, but I know the KGB had actually targeted him to find out. They knew he would be a good one. And like I said, he spoke over 7 different languages, fighter pilot again in World War I. And so that's why he loved the airport. He knew having New York, having their own airport would be really important for the city. And I need to do more research on it because I think it'd be really interesting. And he was in the know. He was tight with FDR. That was one of the reasons the KGB was kind of looking at him and all these other spy networks that supposedly had infiltrated some of his inner circles to find out who he knew, what he was doing. And it would make sense because, like I said, he was very in the know. He was tight with FDR and Eleanor. A lot of, even Churchill knew that it was always like the rank in the country was the president and then the mayor of New York City for power, which is really interesting. Mm-hmm.
That's cool. Yeah. I didn't know.
I mean, listen, guys, when you say I'm going to the city or, the city,
yeah,
it's New York City. There's no other the city. So.
Oh, gotcha.
Yes, sir.
Well, speaking of obsessive portions of your writing, besides Mayor La Guardia, where did your red shoe obsession start and how?
Well, I really like marketing. Shocker. Okay. Well, it actually came from when I was kind of figuring out what Lane, my protagonist, would look like. I had really liked the some of the clothing and stuff from what's her face from Pearl Harbor, Kate Beckinsale.
Yeah.
And in one of her outfits, she even has red shoes on. And then I think the Ben Affleck character even sees her shoes kind of like walk in and some kind of thing, and he knows it's her. And then I was starting to look at her fashion, and I thought that would be a great kind of thing for her to be her kind of trademark. Mm-hmm. And then I really do like marketing. And one of the first times that I went to, I think it was VoucherCon was my first conference I ever went to, and I was like, well, maybe I'll start wearing red shoes wherever I go, like Lane does. It's kind of her favorite pair of shoes. And just because, nobody knows who I am, and why not? It's easier to find people, and, I can start posting about it. And so I did. And I had more people come up to me, even at the first conference I went to. Louise Penny liked my shoes, which I'm like, awesome. And then, I had like 5 other people that were like, I've seen your shoes on Twitter and things like that I was like, this is really fun. So now I have to wear them everywhere, which thank God I really do like red shoes. This is a wine bottle holder actually. Nice. And but yeah, I wear them a lot, but I've actually get in really big trouble when I go to conferences and don't wear them now, even where I think I'm not going to get into trouble, like Thriller Fest last year, where there's much more of a male contingency that I thought could care less about my shoes. And one night that I wore black shoes, they were still Art Deco and still on point. And I got yelled at by like 5 people that I didn't have my red shoes on.
Like, Laurie doesn't have her red shoes.
What? I'm leaving.
Pause on the conference.
Prisoner to your shoes.
Dude, that's awesome marketing then. I mean, that's awesome.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, anything that says that people can see visually. I've had people say that if they see anything Art Deco New York or red shoes, they know it's me. And I'm like, that's perfect.
That's great.
Yeah.
So all those details of the Art Deco of the shoes are all extremely essential to your stories. And I think Karen Michaels tabbed your work, experiential historical fiction, which I think is a tremendous
wow, that's cool.
Tremendous descriptor. But what I want to know is, let me go a little bit further. So all of your research so far seems to fit seamlessly into your stories. I never feel like you're taking us out of the story to give us some research.
Like a lecture.
Yeah, exactly. But what's your personal litmus test that kind of allows you to know how many details to put in there so it doesn't feel like an info dump and everything you do serves the story?
It's a great question. It's hard because, if if you're really excited about something, you tend to geek out about it. And then, one of my biggest, easiest litmus tests is to read it out loud. Because if you think that you're enjoying it, but when you start to read it out loud, you start to realize how long you're going on and maybe I can condense it. The other thing is I look at personally what I enjoy in other books and what I don't enjoy. One of the things is I had a lot of like restaurant details or clothing details just to give you a feel for the time period, but also slang was huge in the 1930s, but I hate slang when I'm reading it. Like a little goes a long way. And some people just love slang, but I'm like, if I read a paragraph and I honestly don't know what 10 words mean, the slang of the time, I'm taken out of the story, right? Yeah. So if you do slang that maybe people just know, like bee's knees or something like that, that we still kind of know what it means, but if it's so obscure, it takes people out of the story. So that's my litmus test, is even if I'm reading it, anything at all, whether it's history, whether it's dialogue going on too long, whether it's, could be anything, even action scenes that go too long, where suddenly, I always say, if you ever read a really good book and you're so consumed by the great book, and then all of a sudden you're very aware you're reading, you're not in the book anymore, that something happened that took you out of the story. And so that's what I always, and I'm usually really brutal with myself of looking at that and see what takes you out of the story to make you aware that you're reading. So right. That's my
an excellent answer. Just a little personal experience. I wrote a script that kind of covered the end of the 19th century to the 20th century. And one of my characters was a real person named Carl Fisher. He used to say Christ on a bicycle. That was like his, that was his, his expletive, I suppose. And it was funny because like it took me a while to leave it in the script because it was just such a funny phrase that it kept taking me out a little bit, but it was so important to him. It was a phrase he used all the time. So I had to end up leaving it in there, but it was definitely a little tug of war as to how much of that to use.
I like that one.
Well, it was kind of he was one of the pioneers of, he had the first bicycle shop in the country that was like an automobile showroom of what they called safeties, which are the bikes we know. Before that, they were called ordinaries with the gigantic wheel and a little wheel in the back. And so everything was about bicycles to him when he first,
what does that mean?
His fortune.
What does it mean?
I guess it just means, like, holy cow. I mean, I don't know. He kind of used it as a catch-all. Anytime he wanted to exclaim his surprise at something or his disgust, it was Christ on a bicycle.
It's like the little squeezy Phil Rizzuto in Seinfeld that pops out of the pothole and says, holy cow. Remember that?
Nope.
You don't know that? Oh, my goodness.
I don't know that one.
She knows that because she knows Seinfeld. The rest of you people can.
I just like how flat it fell.
Anything I say falls flat with that. So, getting back to you, though.
Hold on, I want to laugh a little bit more.
Eric's sentence was not reduced in the prison with that joke.
No, none of them.
But no, getting back to the writing and the details of the era you write in are so authentic and so specific, and you really, when you're reading it, feel like Lane is there. So my question is, how much of Lane Sanders really is the intrepid adventurer L.A. Chandlar?
It's a lot.
Yeah, that's our think.
Probably a lot. I mean, I'm in a lot of everything. I mean, I think, she definitely has a lot of my funny stuff. And then one of my favorite scenes in the Pearl Dagger is based on one of my escapades when I was walking around Manhattan and I had a dress on and then I was wearing a slip. Do you remember me telling you about this story?
No.
It's a good story. Tell it, please.
Uh-oh. Tell our readers.
It was like that. I even have pictures on Instagram and stuff because it's so stinking funny. But this slip was like, I was fighting with it all day. I don't know if it like gotten too big or something. And all of a sudden it's down low. And I'm like, eventually it's going to be up around my neck. So finally I had it and I threw my purse down on the sidewalk on my neck, and I took my slip off.
Oh, nice.
There was a guy passing that started to trip, and I'm like, "Can you take my picture?" So
I saw that.
And I had my slip, and I'm like throwing it in the trash can. So I thought it was really funny. So I have Lane doing something similar in the Pearl Dagger because I think it's hilarious, and that's so New York. Like stuff like that happens all the time. And well, to me.
Did you really get a random to take your picture?
Yeah.
Doing that?
100%.
I remember when she posted it.
Yeah.
I'm tired of this stupid thing.
Like, dude, take this picture. Be like, okay.
Yeah. Just came to the camera.
So yeah, I put lots of stuff like that in there. I do, yeah. I mean, she's definitely like me a lot. I also really love Aunt Evelyn, her aunt. She's Aunt Evelyn, who I want to be when I'm in my 60s. I love her. She's an artist. She's eccentric, and she can hang with Eleanor Roosevelt, but she can also have friends who are super poor artists and prostitutes, and she's fine with all of it. And I love that about her. I think it's so cool. So I would love to have that be who I am one day. So yeah, there's a lot of me in everything. Yeah.
Laurie would like to be friends with poor artists and prostitutes. She said it here.
You beat me to it.
Instead, she's friends with us. Talk about falling
Same
flat
thing.
there.
It's kind of the same thing.
Poor
Same.
prostitutes.
Put them together.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So Laurie, speaking of adventure, you mentioned you moved to New York City 2 weeks after 9/11. That was a crazy, chaotic time to move to the city. Why?
Why?
You know, we had just, both my husband and I had gotten a job offer to move here, and we were settled in Indianapolis and had a house we kind of refurbished and stuff. But it was one of those questions that New York was never on our horizon. A lot of people would love to move to New York or LA, and they've always dreamed of it. We hadn't really. But this job offer was really interesting, and you know, we didn't have kids, and I was like, we had to sell a house. It was hard. We had to move away from a lot of our friends and family. But I feel like most people regret what they don't try in life versus things that they do and feel like weren't that great of an idea. And quite honestly, I was like, let's give it a try. I mean, if we don't like it, so what? Like, we can move back to the suburbs are always waiting for us. Yeah. So we decided we'd move, and it was tough. I mean, a lot of our family, you know, they know there's all these, you know, TV shows are filmed there, and dangerous. Law and Order is filmed there. That was my number one argument against us moving there. Law and Order is filmed there. Like, well, yes.
Every 10 feet.
And friends. So, but I figured why not? And if we didn't like it, that's fine. And but I do believe you really do regret the things you don't try. And we've been here now 18 years. I've loved living here. A lot of really interesting perks about living here than I never would have seen. Like even the public schools that we're a part of, I had no idea. It's such a walking culture. We haven't owned a car in 18 years. Jeez. And and everybody, like the private schools pull from all over the city, but the public schools pull from your neighborhood. So as soon as my oldest started kindergarten, like the whole neighborhood walked to school together in the morning. And then they close off the streets, and then all the parents and nannies and babysitters or whatever would let the kids go inside, and all the adults stood around drinking coffee together for a while before we went on our day. And I'm like, this is the best community because you're not enclosed in the bubble of your car. I really like that. I still have both my boys and us, like, we know the names of all the people, like in Starbucks and the grocery store and the cleaners. And I really like that aspect a lot. Yeah.
I miss that and the food.
Yeah.
The food.
Food is yeah. Agree.
So Laurie has a new job in 2020 that not everybody knows. We certainly
Food's
do.
Nuts.
But you are the new department chair for the incoming class of 2020 at Thriller Fest, the debut author program. Yeah. So I'm not sure
another toast is in order. Another toast.
What you did wrong, but there you go.
Yeah. What happened?
Yeah. All right. So just for everyone's sake, what does that job entail? And do you personally have any ideas, new or changes that you'd like to make for your inaugural year?
That's a great idea. So International Thriller Writers does the conference every year called Thriller Fest, which is handled in New York City in July. And it's a really great program for all authors who are coming out with a new book in the coming year. They can be part of this program. So what we've done in the past is there's different question and answer times, kind of a time to let you build connections with other authors. And then we do this really nice, they call it the debut author breakfast, where you get to share with a ballroom full of people about you and your book for a short amount of time.
1 minute, people.
60 seconds.
60 seconds goes really fast.
Yeah, it goes really fast. But it's you know, what's really surprising is that the crime writing community is really encouraging community. And so what that whole program is about is making connections. Like, you know, like you guys and me, we all got to be friends through Thriller Fest.
Right.
And it really helps you kind of launch your career to just even to connect with other people on a deeper level, and make connections in the industry where you're going to meet your next publishers and agents and editors and press. It's definitely an industry kind of conference. So for me, one of the things I want to do is I really do like to connect people a lot. So I want to bring more of that to the program. So we've done some question and answer times before, and then I want to kind of expand that a little bit where we can then debrief with maybe a couple other authors. And, you know, there's little things we've done like going out to dinner, and it really is these little nuanced things that actually build relationships. I was a debut author in 2017. And I still have really good friends from that time, and I met them like during that debut author breakfast. Like all the
who did you sit next to in that breakfast? Who was that?
Jack Carr. And it really, we were right in a row. A.F. Brady and Ellison Cooper and Jack Carr and L.A. Chandler. We're all like the alphabet was right there, and we were all we're so close.
She changed her last name to do that on purpose.
The best part was Jack, because Jack I hadn't met yet, and he's, you know, ex-Navy SEAL and has all this experience, and he comes and sits down to me, and I'm like got my red shoes on, and you know, we're almost identical people, and so we're talking about what we're gonna say. I go, did you know what you're gonna say? And he's like, yeah, I think so. And then I said, so, you know, do you really have it down? He goes, well, I don't know. What are you going to say? So, bond. It was great.
I think Edwin was sucking on lemons next to me when he was getting ready to talk, because I was trying to chat with him, and he just walls.
People are like you. Well, one thing is when we went there, I'm big on communication. I want to know what's going to happen. And I'd asked the guy who was leading it, who is a good friend of mine, but I was like, how big is this? Because I'd been to other debut breakfasts before, but I was like, you know, there may be like 100 people come or whatever. And I never got an answer. So then we walk in the room and we first see this like raised platform where all the authors are going to be. And we're like,
it's like a wedding.
Yeah. And then there was like 400 people going to be in there and standing room only. So all of us authors walked in, and every single one of us was like, we go in and we're like, oh. That was so surprising. So it's kind of nerve-wracking, but the community is so generous. Like they really genuinely care.
Yeah.
These massively, you know, successful people on the audience that are really excited to see your book launch. And it's all different genres of mystery. It wasn't just, you know, a certain kind of mystery. It was everything, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Really nice.
No, Steve Barry.
You mentioned community. You mentioned community, which is a great segue. So of all the authors we know and have met, no one's a bigger advocate or a more welcoming presence than you have been to us and to others that we've seen in front of us. You're omnipresent. Signings, conferences, workshops, libraries, pretty much wherever the written word's celebrated. So could you tell us a little bit about what that community means to you and why you guard it so fiercely?
Aw, that's really sweet. Thank you. Well, you know, I've worked in different parts of the entertainment world. I've been in the music world a bit. I helped manage a rock band for 5 years. I have a public relations background. I've worked a bit on some boards for the fine arts. I have friends that I've mentored in the theater world and the dance world. And you know, really the writing world is another form of the entertainment community. And what I've been really surprised by is the generosity and the camaraderie of cheering each other on. And it's very unusual. And I feel like that is something that I do want to protect and I do want to encourage, because it's just very rare. And I feel like usually other people have to fail for you to succeed in most entertainment worlds. So to be able to do something where I've had several authors, I still, the first conference I went to, I was doing a signing, and I always mention her because it was just very meaningful to me, but Hank Philippi Ryan had come up to one of my signing and she's a big writer. She's an investigative reporter in Boston. She's won like 40 some Emmys, and very classy lady. And I knew who she was, but had never met her. And then she came to one of my tables where I was signing books and liked the banner and liked my red shoes. And she's like, could you sign this for me? And I was like, it was like J.K. Rowling and John Grisham together had asked me to sign their book. And I'm like, oh, like, it was so meaningful. And she was so nice and was like, please let me know, how I can help you. And I've tried to emulate that ever since then. I felt like
let me live with you.
Yeah, I was like, I just really admired that. And I think it's a strength actually to be encouraging to other people and to really mean like I'm trying to help you. And I admire that a lot. So
yeah. That's so true.
So Laurie, the word on the street is you have a Christmas book in the works.
What?
I do.
You. So could you share a little bit about what it's all about?
Yeah, it's a book that I had actually written a long time ago that was really just meant to be, it was a leading piece for a talk that I did. So it really wasn't meant to be like a full novel, but I had a friend who worked here in New York, who works for a nonprofit that helps people in the United Nations get acclimated to the city. People from all over the world come in and they help them with everything, finding doctors to, English as a second language, just everything practical and connections and whatnot. So anyway, around like November one year, one of the leaders knew that I had done some different talks before. So she goes, we always do this tea for women in the United Nations over the holidays, and we usually focus on Hanukkah and Christmas because it's the December timeframe. Do you do a talk on any of the traditions, for Hanukkah and Christmas? And as any good entrepreneur will say, yes, I do.
Of course.
I totally do.
Of course.
Of course I do. Just writing one. Oh my God. So I started writing this talk, and it was really fun because it's true. It's like, if you think about it, the city is full of like all these different icons that, like this Rockefeller Christmas tree and all these huge, beautiful menorahs and wreaths and stocking. I mean, just everything. So I did a brief talk on it and then started uncovering all this really cool history about some of these traditions that we have. Like, the first Rockefeller Christmas tree was not put up by the Rockefellers, but by the construction workers in 1931 when they were building the building. And there's great pictures of the first tree. And one of the workers just was grateful and brought in a tree, and they decorated with construction worker stuff. There's blasting caps on it. And paper and tools. It's adorable. And then John D. Rockefeller Jr. saw it and was like, that's a great idea. And so they started it like in 1933. It's that kind of stuff that I love that. And I felt like it would be really fun there's all these historic moments that happen in history that we don't really get to be an eyewitness about. You hear about it in a textbook, but again, the whole experiential historical fiction is what you get to live in the pocket. So I was always wondering, like, who did that and why they do that. And so if I tell the story, the fictitious part of like maybe the person that brought in that tree, we get to live that moment in a different kind of way. So the book is about a modern day journalist that is an ex-cop turned journalist who is given what she thinks is a fluff assignment to find out and write kind of the human interest side to all these stories. And she's sent to New York, which really there are, a ton of these stories actually have turning points in New York City. So she meets with historians and all sorts of people that I've met with. And then they tell her the gist of like, let's just say the Christmas tree, sort of the historic part of it, that they're like, but, I have story about it, and then they share this personal story, and then you get to read this personal account of how that tree got put up in the first place. So I love it. I think it's really, there's so many cool parts of, again, that whole beauty out of ashes thing that I love so much. It's all over the place. There's so many really cool traditions that made the holiday time period warmer and more family friendly and it happened even during times of war. There's stories from the Civil War and the Korean War and the World War I Christmas truce.
Right.
And I'm like, it's really powerful. And to be able to live through that in these books is really, really fun. So yeah, I'm working on that. My agent is working on that, and hopefully we'll be selling that soon.
Cool.
So I'm always fascinated by what takes an author from an interest to a subject matter expert. So for instance, you clearly have a love for the Art Deco era. But did you have it before you moved to New York? And then if not, or if so, what was the catalyst to put that into the novel?
That's a great question. Well, you know, it kind of went through the reason I do love Art Deco stuff. And I think a lot of people do. It's a really interesting art form that happened during the interwar years between the two iron bookends of the World War. So it's a really short era.
Yeah.
And yet, even if you're not an artsy person, you know what Art Deco means. Like certain things come to mind, like buildings or certain things you might see from a Gatsby party or things like that.
Yep.
There's really no other art movements like that like anybody might know. And I thought that was fascinating. And then especially once I started looking at the 30s more, I realized most of the Art Deco stuff happened in the 30s, which really I'd kind of, again, pigeonholed more maybe into the 20s, like in the Gatsby era. But really, most of it happened during the Depression. And I really loved what that stood for, because it was so beautiful and so meaningful still to this day. And yet it happened in a time where there was, 25% unemployment, and there were soup lines in shanty towns, and people were having a really hard time, and yet beauty was still being created. So I really got into it because of that.
Very cool. Well, Laurie, you have survived the question time, but now can you survive the lightning round?
Ooh, yes. And I have a special drink for that.
Switch drinks. You might need it when the stupidity ensues.
This is the crew reviews first. This is the crew reviews first. He has a special drink for the lightning round.
That's awesome.
I'm going to refill my...
It's a triple.
So, Laurie, what's your special drink? What is it?
Yeah, what is it?
Whiskey sour with bourbon. And I have my whiskey sour recipes online if you want it, but it's the best whiskey sour mix ever.
Nice.
And I've ruined it completely, because now every time I order whiskey sour, I'm so disappointed.
Well, as the guys know, I don't drink bourbon or whiskey.
Not at all. Never seen it.
Really? Unless it's Japanese.
He drinks water like a fish.
Sure. Related.
80 proof.
Christmas angel got me waiting up like Christmas Eve. Forget the presents, baby, give me what I need. You're the miracle that I believe.
I'll put you up on the housetop, hot like a brick, creeping down that chimney like good Saint Nick. Shorter days mean the nights get longer. When we're together, our love can go stronger. Jingle my bells, baby, this Christmas night I'm gonna love you right. Jingle my bells, baby, it's cold outside. Hang your stockings by my fireside. Jingle my bells, baby, this Christmas night I'm gonna love you right. Jingle my bells, baby, it's cold outside. Hang your stockings by my fireside. I'm your secret Santa, wanna give you my surprise.
I'm the real things that got me on the naughty list, boo.
I'll set the mood with twinkling Christmas lights.
No LED bullshit, this is for real, shorty.
You can trim my tree, it's all bright. Then I'll light those cookies by candlelight.
Shorter days mean the nights get longer. Now we're together, together, baby, our love goes stronger. Jingle my bells, baby, this Christmas night I'm gonna love you right. Jingle my bells, baby, it's cold outside. Hang your stockings by my fireside. Jingle my bells, baby, this Christmas night I'm gonna love you right. Jingle my bells, baby, it's cold outside. Hang your stockings by my fireside. Jingle my bells, give them just a little jingle.
Don't need no mistletoe. That's right, you already know.
Jingle my bells, give them just a little jingle. Tomorrow morning you'll say, damn, I need another holiday. Jingle my bells, give them just a little jingle. I thank the Lord above for giving me your body to love. Ooh. Jingle my bells, give them just a little jingle. My candy cane, my peppermint stick. Jingle my bells, give them just a little jingle. My jolly old Kris Kringle. Jingle my bells, give them just a little jingle. My jolly old Kris Kringle.
Okay, so I am up first. Since you have a background with musical bands, I want to know, what is your favorite rock band of all time?
Oh boy, like picking my favorite child. I really
We only have two to choose from for that, so this is much better.
Yeah, I really like a wide variety. I mean, I love all the old 80s bands like U2 and Journey and all those. I really love 90s. I even liked Nirvana, and I love Foo Fighters, Red Hot Chili Peppers, love those.
Spice Girls.
What you want? What you really? No, not really.
There we go.
You're still not answering the question here.
Yeah.
Eric, you were narrowing it down?
Well, I was going to narrow it down and say, so since that's so vague, we can get more specific for you. What is your favorite Canadian rock band?
What is it?
There's only one answer to.
What?
What is that band? It feels like someone like named maybe Simon didn't know of it. What's it?
The Canadian person didn't know about it? That's
Can
true.
you believe that?
There we go.
Rush.
Did you hear that, Simon? She knows the answer.
Yeah, come on. She's in New York.
Neil Peart. What?
Yeah.
So Lane gets transported to modern day Manhattan. What is going to shock her the most if she's with you now?
That's a great question.
Don't encourage him.
Probably a couple of the really weird buildings going up. There's those really tall, Chris, have you seen them? Those tall, skinny buildings just on like Central Park South. They're like this big and a million stories tall. I think she'd be really surprised at the size. I think, the Empire State Building went up in 31 as well. And
18 months. 18
really,
months.
yeah, I bet she'd be really surprised at the number of the buildings that have now dwarfed some of those. And I actually also think she might be surprised at how some of the streets are exactly the same. I always say this too. I feel like the New York changes and it stays the same. And there's so many side streets, especially, that you walk down, and if you were to change the fashion in the cars, you would not know what era it was in, which is so cool. So I think she'd be surprised both on the progress and the similarities still.
So considering your newest book did have a little bit of London going on in it, what is your favorite British dessert?
Don't even.
Do they have those?
Might have heard of one or two.
I have heard of one or two. And I was going to do this later because it's for Adam Hamdy, but it's this.
What?
Look what she made. Something that Adam thinks about frequently, or definitely recently.
Oh my gosh.
That has to be the greatest reveal in show history.
It's actually really good. Wait, Chris, what was this called again?
I'm not.
It's called Spotted Dick.
What is it called?
Spotted
you.
Dick.
Spotted Dick.
That's really good. I really literally made it.
Hilarious. It's hilarious.
That is a riot.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful moment in show history right there.
So my final question, and this one's not a stretch.
Laurie just put Spotted Dick on our show.
Yes, she did.
My favorite moment ever was your.
We're going to have to end without, apparently, because he's not going to let us go on. He's just going to laugh. So
Enjoy. The best part ever was you going, please, next question.
all Spotted Dick aside, this segues perfectly into Sean plays dress up one night, and he takes your red shoes out on the town. And, of course, he's a big dude, so he breaks the heels. What's his punishment?
That's part of what he wants.
What's his punishment? He broke your red heel.
Wearing them was my punishment, wasn't it? I mean, they hurt
No,
your
I don't think
feet.
so. I don't think so. That's probably.
I hear.
And he's asking for a spanking, so you can't do that.
I know what his punishment is. His punishment is rewatching the Notre Dame Michigan game.
Oh, we love Laurie so much on this show. She's so great.
Brilliant.
I'm sorry, my eyes are watering.
Show,
I bow to your genius.
And we're done.
Well done.
Rude. I don't think we're going to be able to top this.
That was the most beautiful, cruel remark ever on the show.
Total burn.
Pure genius.
But Mike, it is your time to try to top that thing.
All right, here we go. I don't know.
That's up to you.
I don't know. All right. Given the time period of your books that you write in, what was the year your writer self was born?
I would say about 1870. 1860, 1870.
That makes you 22. All right. Perfect.
No, because
L.A. Louise Alcott.
Wait, that's even worse. Yeah, move on.
All right, we'll go with something easier. You're opening a historically accurate speakeasy. What do you call it?
Spotted Dick.
Oh,
Spotted Dick and the Cure. That's a new band.
I'll call it Mary Jane's to go with my red Mary Jane shoes.
Okay. All right.
That's what
That was not a marijuana reference for those.
Or was it?
There's a ski hill out here named that.
Shoot.
De Blasio outlaws red-colored footwear.
Oh.
What's your kill count by day 2?
Oh, he's a tough one. Anyway.
Hi.
Double digits. At least double digits.
Okay, gotcha. Just how good are you at playing the game Clue?
You know, I get really frustrated really fast. So I'm actually really good for half the game, and then I get really mad and frustrated, and then I don't care anymore.
And there's things being thrown.
Not really good.
Okay. This is a 2-part question. A, can I kill Eric in your next book? And B, if so, how does that go down?
Is it a historical book like in the 30s?
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Oh, definitely with a machine gun, because those were big.
That's beautiful.
And I think you would both definitely have to have fedoras on.
Okay.
And I think he could be like another cop kind of thing. You could be a gangster.
Yeah.
And it was like a car shootout kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm digging all of that. See,
He's
it's
the bad
writing,
guy.
it's
I
writing
agree with
itself.
this.
It's writing itself right there.
I'm the hero. He's the bad guy. I like.
And then I get to run over his dead body. Yeah.
So I picture it. Eric just stepping out into the street and Mike driving a 1930s yellow cab and just running him over.
Yeah, I like that too. Just the tire marks right over his face. Yeah. Boom.
Boom.
Oh, wait, did I run over something?
No, you don't even stop.
There's an opening, apparently, Laura. You got the job. I'm dead.
It's all our plan's wording beautifully.
Exactly.
All right, Shawnee boy, let's hear what you got.
Okay, so hoping that I don't glitch so much that I don't understand what you're saying. You are transported to 1930s New York City. How do you make your living?
Oh, I know.
I would definitely be a journalist.
A journalist.
Yeah, for sure.
Ah.
Yeah, they were still, like I said, women were doing a lot of like great jobs, and even though they were still men, kind of leading the force, there were some really amazing. And I would have to be, and I really like. I love how the journalists of the day were always running around after Fiorello La Guardia. Like they would camp outside City Hall, literally waiting for him to make news. And there's so many articles that I find that like you can't keep up with him. I love all that. That's what I would do.
All right. All right, Shani.
Okay, what is another city and another era that you think would make an outstanding novel setting?
Ooh, Detroit for sure. Always it has a lot of my heart in it anyway, which, Lane goes to visit in the Gold Pond for part of that too. There's so much vitality in there that I think in some of the later years where there's so much corruption and the city had kind of degenerated a lot, it was such a vivacious city. It was where you went. If you had innovation and you had anything you wanted to try that was new, you went to Detroit. And so I really like that. I love Chicago. I love the golden age of Hollywood too. It would be really fun to do something in the 30s, 40s in Hollywood as well.
Yeah. No, not Kokomo.
Okay.
Kokomo.
Not Kokomo. Not way down in Kokomo.
Al. The city of first. The first American automobile was made here. Do you drive a car? Yeah, you should be thanking us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Laurie doesn't drive.
So, question number 3. What animal is often called a glutton or a skunk bear?
Oh, I think you're making a reference to probably something where I went to school. Are you?
What?
He might be.
Yes, it's a wolverine.
Of course he is.
Wolverine is often referred to as a skunk bear.
You get to watch the
skunk
game
bear.
again.
Chris left. He doesn't want to be a part of this.
Okay.
Here.
Question number 4. Question number 4. You have to pick a pal from history, and it cannot be Mr. LaGuardia. Who are you picking as your pal?
Oh,
Pal.
Amelia Earhart.
Oh, that's a good one.
I can
I
see
love
that.
her.
Yeah. You two
Yeah,
peas in a
that was
pod.
really
Cool.
her.
Be fun.
She-
Okay, what animal in the animal kingdom would make the best novelist? And you cannot pick a Wolverine. Is that right?
Best novelist. Probably something like an owl, where they could fly
That's
and
right.
see something really high, but they were intelligent and could,
And they worked
Damn,
well
that's
at night.
a way better answer. I was
Yeah.
really hoping for a poor answer. That was a great answer.
Not going to get a poor answer out of her. Good try, though.
I know.
Come on.
Try.
Come on. So, Lori, my turn.
Poor not being the right word. I was hoping for a little more struggle, but she
No.
zipped that off like she'd
No.
had it this morning.
She's answered that one 10 times.
I guarantee you that's what Mike was thinking. Owl.
Owl? I was thinking spotted owl or no, just owl.
No, just spotted owl.
Spotted
Spotted
something.
dick, spotted owl.
It's as long as it's spotted.
Yep, as long as it's got spots.
works on so many levels.
Yes, absolutely.
Lori, best place
Such
to live
children.
in Manhattan? Uptown, midtown, or downtown?
It's not as trendy, but I really like. Wait, did you say to live?
Yeah, live.
Yeah, I think uptown. I like living uptown.
Which side of the park?
I like the east side.
There you go. Awesome.
Totally biased.
Sunsets. Yeah.
So if you had a pet lion, which I think we shared videos just recently of.
Everybody does.
Mhm.
Awesome. What would you name it, and what color would its collar be?
Sebastian, and
Mm.
because I have a large stuffed lion still that I had in college, and the collar
Yeah.
probably would be just a good basic leather collar, but maybe with like an S on it in red.
Ooh.
Like a
In
shoe.
red. There you go.
Yeah, super.
And so now, if you had to kick out one of the 5 boroughs of New York City,
In red.
which would you choose?
To kick them out, did you say?
God, there's only 4 boroughs left. You got to
Who's
kick
gone?
one out. Which one is it?
You know I live here, right?
That's why you got to pick one.
20% of our audience is about to leave her.
One's got to go. Come on, there's an easy one. You can pick an easy one.
There's an easy one.
No, I literally have people on all of them.
She doesn't want to lose an audience. Yeah.
All right, I'll pick one for you.
I know. I'll say it's not a borough, but Jersey.
Yeah, the sixth borough. That's where I was going. Kick the sixth borough out. That's where I grew up. People are like, yeah, no, I grew up. No, it's not. You're in Jersey. So let me ask you: is it Houston Street or Houston Street?
Houston.
They spell it the same.
They spell it the same.
Yeah.
It's Houston.
There's a great deli on Houston Street, Cats. If you've ever been, it's really good. And so my last question: do you know where Sesame Street is?
I can tell you how to get there.
Yeah.
You know, I did just hear about it, but I don't know where it was though.
Supposedly, the director and the producer had two different ideas. One was the Upper West Side, and the other was actually Alphabet City.
Oh, okay.
And it was supposed to be called 123 Avenue B or something like that, as opposed to Sesame Street.
I can't
Yeah.
anything but Sesame Street. Yeah.
Sesame Street's better.
I love that. That's so cool.
Laurie, you survived the lightning round.
Very nice. It was really fun.
She scored some high points too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she's the only person that brought a baked dish to a lightning round.
Exactly. But we don't get to try it somehow. So this is almost like a tease.
Right?
That thing cooked 2 hours. I cooked it for 2 hours.
You're going to eat that?
How much I love you.
She'll be making it again for Thriller Fest.
Kids, we're having spotted dick this week for dinner.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, send it to the kids' school. I'm sure they'll have a lot of conversation at lunch.
Brian will enjoy it.
He better.
What is this again?
Eat
Never
it.
mind.
Just eat
It's
it.
English. Eat it.
Watch, one of our kids will marry a British person, and that'll be like the wedding cake. It'll be
Really big spotted
It really
never.
tastes good. I was tasting it earlier. I was like,
Is it good? That's awesome.
We're having it at Thriller Fest.
We are.
Chris, you're killing
We should have a spotted dick giveaway contest.
I'm in. The 12-year-old answers. There we go.
Don't forget the recipe.
Damn you, Adam Hamdi. Damn you.
Called the ultimate spotted dick.
That's right. That's right.
Look what he started. Look what he started.
Adam, it's Adam's fault. Adam Hamdi.
All his fault.
I know
We
who
might have
got
asked
point-
him the question,
I
though.
might
We
have
might
asked
have
him that
actually
question, though. Yeah,
Sean
Might have been Mike's fault.
it might be my fault.
That would be Mike's fault.
Just like the show, it's my fault.
It definitely is. Can we cheer?
Can we cheer?
We can definitely cheer, Laurie. Thank you, Laurie.
And Merry
We
Christmas.
appreciate having
Merry Christmas,
Merry
sister.
Christmas.
Thank you so much for having
You're a
me.
treasure, kid.
So
Yeah,
fun.
we love you.
Love you guys.
Thanks for joining us for another awesome interview. The crew wants to thank Laurie Chandlar for joining us today to discuss her Art Deco series, New York City, and her writing journey. Please go out and get a copy of Laurie's newest novel, The Pearl Dagger, and support our friend and colleague. To find out more, go to her website, lachandler.com. And if you enjoy our show, please like our podcast, share the interview on social media, and be sure to tell friends and families. As always, a huge thanks to my co-hosts, Mike Houts, Chris Albanese, and Sean Cameron. Boys, let's toast it to another interview. Successful.
Hey.
Cheers, gents.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone. You
Christmas.
filthy animals.
Merry Christmas.
You filthy animal. Total pro.
Merry Christmas.
It only came back on every time Spotted Dick was said. Then he's like, I heard Spotted Dick. And then,
I did.
oh, yeah, hey.
Play this.
Did you play it?
This is our typical once a night week therapy session, Laurie. It's free. It's free.
Wait. Who is filming it?
My son.
Is it Jackson?
Jackson. He goes, no, this isn't weird.
Where we all came up with great ideas, actually awful ideas that can make the show better. And
nothing can go wrong with that.
no, and
There's a lot wrong.
this will be the first show Eric and I have more dignity than you two after the end of the show.
So
Yeah. I hear giggling.
always giggling, always laughing.
And I can't see Sean still. So he's doing it. We know.
Chris is knocking over everything in this office. He's just knocking everything.
What's happening over there?
I'm knocking.
Here.
It's like a cat. He's just knocking everything off.
You guys are all frozen, so I just heard Mike start laughing, and it made me start laughing.
I don't know why they're laughing either.
I
They might as well be
turned
frozen
around,
to me. So
Listen, I turned around because Laurie was talking about the annotations that are in the back of our books, you know, the bibliography type stuff. And I went to go grab the book, and I literally knocked
Just
everything
knocking
over.
shit off.
And Mike's like, knock some more shit over, will you?
he will. Apparently.
We should probably take it from the top of Eric's question.
No, this should all stay in because this is us.
Well, no, it'll be on the blooper reel.
He's setting up the books.
I was trying to hold together. I looked at Chris, and that was it.
2 tips: smile and don't be monotone.
Dude, energy.
And just the tip.
Energy. Read the word.
Energy.
Feel the words.
And don't yell in your microphone, dude.
Fix
I'll
your
sit
hat,
back
please.
here.
Yeah.
Fix your hat. Fix your hat. Fix your hat.
What's wrong with my hat?
Fix it.
It looks fantastic to
The
me.
guy that's in it.
We love Bish.
Are we ready now?
Christmas.
Waiting on you, buddy. Waiting on you.
Anytime now. Jeez.
Come on, dude.
Shut up. I'm gonna. You have 2 hours to edit if you don't shut up and let me talk.
Spotted dick.
That's okay. You guys mess up a few words every time you talk. So
Not that I recall.
that's
every time
because
I
you're
talk.
Never.
that's
Is it over? Because I didn't hear anything.
good. You can watch it on Dropbox in a few days.
He was frozen.
Ready for the outro?
The whole damn show is going to be new to me. I'm like, that's a great answer.
There we go.
We're gonna make. We love you, Bish.
We love you.
I know.
Bishop. Seriously. Maybe even more than I should. But
Before we do this, how cool?
You're the only man I've kissed in a while, Mike. So
What?
Hey,
Disgusting.
hey, no.
it's on video.
It's my birthday.
It's your birthday. You always get a. It's either
You can do whatever
spankings
you
or a kiss.
Listen,
Yeah.
birthdays are passes.
Yeah,
So,
I got my free pass. Merry Fistmas.
Merry Fistmas, the official
Fistmas.
Christmas beer of the Crew Reviews.
It's the Festivus for the rest of us.
Woo!
That cat's like, Jesus, your breath is.
He's like, what?
You've been licking your ass all afternoon or
You
something?
smell like booze.
Merry Christmas and welcome to the Crew Reviews. Mike, Sean, Chris, and I are excited to have you with us today. What?
That's beautiful. Cut. Let's go to the outro.
Let me pour a drink.
Your neighbors hate your decorations. Your neighbors hate your decorations. Your neighbors hate your decorations. And you should take them down. Every inch of your house is covered in lights. They're energy inefficient. People can't sleep at night.
There is such a thing as good taste.
Your lawn's an abomination.
With cheap, tacky, kitschy Christmas crap.
Please, dear God, take them down.
Jiminy Christmas, take them down.
Now take it all down. Oh, Christmas tree, how lovely are your branches.
Guys, that's great, but I'm Jewish. L'chaim!
Oh, Hanukkah, come light the menorah. Let's have a party, we'll all dance the hora. Hey!
Do you all do... Merry Christmas... Oh, whatever.
Mr. Goodman from next door giveth thee this fruitcake. Hath it fallen on the floor? Who can tell with fruitcake?
Possibly from last year's batch,
or perhaps regifted.
Yuletide baked goods off dispatch, long since have persisted.
Sorry about the fruitcake.
The office Christmas party had been a great success till you drank too much eggnog and started to undress. So now you know you're fired. You've got a restraining order signed. These forms as required. Don't ever come back to work.
You know, I like to party.